Chapter 29. Pursuit. But we couldn't find him. The exhibition hall was full to bursting. My hand flapped so much that Kat told me to shove it in under my jacket. By now she was reverting to mean, mad Miss Catastrophe, and our minds were at polar extremes. We ended up back at the entrance. There were several guards on duty, but the strange man wasn't among them. Kat approached a woman guard, who was in the middle of searching somebody's bag. "Excuse, miss," Kat said. The woman looked round, lips turned down. "What?" she snapped. "Do you know where Christy is?" "Christy? What's it to you?" "He's a friend. I have a message for him." "A message?" "An important message." "What about?" "It's private." "Private?" The woman gave the handbag she was searching back to the owner. "He's just radioed. He says he's got a stomach bug. He's leaving for the day, which means me and my two mates here, we're on our own, right? And we've got no time to stand blathering to his friends, right?" "Right," said Kat. "With him it's always the same. Sick this, dentist that, dead uncle the other. Never rains but it pours." Her lips went down. She shook her head. "Ha ha, just like his name. If you do catch him up on the way to the tube, give him a message from me. I'm sick of him being sick. He needn't bother coming in tomorrow. He's fired." "Fired?" I said, thinking of people being burned on the stake in the olden days. "Fired, sacked, given the boot, take your pick." I stared at her, and so did Kat. Then Kat grabbed me by the sleeve. "Hurry, Ted." She dodged past the other people exiting, dragging me with her. I trod on 3 people's feet, but they were big biker men wearing thick black boots, and they didn't notice. We were out in the open air, across the lights, and had only just time to notice the weather. High stratus cloud, fine sunshine, before we were in the tube station at the ticket barriers, and we glimpsed the strange man walking towards the eastbound platform. "It's him!" squeaked Kat. "Hurry!" I took my ticket out of my pocket. My hand shook itself out so hard I dropped it. Kat screeched. I picked it up. The machine plucked it from my hand and spat it out on top. "Pick it up, Ted! Pick it up!" I'd forgotten that the barriers don't open until you've retrieved your ticket. I picked it up and went through. "Run!" I ran after her, head off to the side. I saw her hurl herself onto a waiting train. The doors beeped, about to close. I stepped on and got trapped. It felt like I was being squeezed from 3 dimensions into 2. Kat heaved at the doors and yanked me in. Oof! She turned into a tornado, an unstoppable force. "He's in the next carriage down, not far from the door. I can see him," she said. "I'll keep my eye on him. We'll get off when he does." It was a rattling old-style tube train that screeched and jerked. We held tight to the bar as it took the sharper bends. Sloane Square, Victoria, Blackfriars, Tower Hill, Aldgate East. The tube destination said, Upminster. Were we going all the way out there? After Stepney Green, Kat stooped into a crouch like a tiger about to spring and dragged me into a stooping position too. "He's getting up," she hissed. The train braked. It pulled into Mile End and halted. There was a pause. Seconds ticked by. Everybody waited silently. A man opposite tapped his foot on the floor. With a swoosh, the doors opened. Kat grabbed me and flew off the train, almost knocking over a gentleman trying to board. "Sorry," she muttered, pulling me after her by the sleeve of my sweatshirt. She ran behind a chocolate machine. The strange man was walking briskly down the platform and up a flight of steps. "Now," said Kat. We emerged from behind the chocolate machine. "Don't run," said Kat. "Saunter." "Saunter," I said. I'm not good at sauntering, but I did my best. We sauntered down the platform, up the steps, through the ticket barrier to the street entrance. Kat spotted him across the street. We crossed too and did some more sauntering behind him. He never looked round. His hands were in his jacket pockets, and his head was down as if he was having a long train of thought. He paused at a corner by some traffic lights and outside a pub called the Falcon Arms. We stopped too. After a moment he went inside the pub. It was a large, grubby building with big bay windows and no curtains. It had a drooping white banner across the entrance saying, "Open all day." Above it swung a sign showing a picture of a falcon perched on a branch with a mouse in its beak. You could tell from the way the mouse's tail was flying behind that in the picture there was a strong wind, maybe gale force 7. "What now, Cat?" I said. "We wait," Cat said. "Wait?" I said. "As long as it takes." "You know what Dad says?" "What?" "Pubs are black holes. People go in there and never come out again." "He's only joking, Ted." We stood on the street corner for 5 minutes. Cat got restless. The traffic streamed by. Cat said she felt like a sore thumb. Her thumb looked fine to me. I was just about to ask what she meant when she said, "I'm going to sneak up to that pub window, Ted. You stay put." I watched her sneak forward. She approached the bay window like a 00 agent on a mission to save the world. "He's propping up the bar," she hissed over to me. I imagined a bar on wobbly trestles liable to fall down at any moment. She took another look inside. "He's got a long glass of dark brown stuff in front of him, and he's hardly touched it," she reported. "He's watching TV on a big screen." She rejoined me. "He could be in there for some time. Let's cross and wait by the television shop near that bus stop. We can watch TV while we wait, and people will just think we're waiting for the bus." We crossed over by the lights and stared at the TV images in the window. People chatting, laughing, shaking their heads. A mid-afternoon game show. We could see, but not hear them. We had 18 different TVs to choose from, but they were all tuned to the same channel. The game show ended, and the news came on. 18 screens of soldiers in a foreign country walking up dusty streets with heavy guns. 18 screens of African children with flies all around their large eyes and no clothes on. You could tell they were starving. 18 screens of the Prime Minister giving a speech at a convention, his 2 hands shaking themselves out over the podium as he spoke, a bit like mine. Then, 18 screens of our living room, our sofa times 18, Rashid times 18, Aunt Gloria with her white sweater, her orange lips and pale cheeks times 18. She was talking. The cameras went in close. I could see the word, "Please." Cat gasped. "Auntie Glo!" Cat squeaked. "Our living room, on TV!" "I forgot to tell you," I said. "Forgot to tell me?" "They called in the press." "The press?" "They came in a big van." "They came while I was gone?" "Yes, Cat." "And you didn't tell me?" "No." Cat rolled her eyes. "I didn't have a chance, Cat, not with all those motorbikes." We watched as the 18 shots of our living room switched to 18 pictures of Salim, the one of him in his school blazer looking neither happy nor sad, then to a telephone number for contacting the police. The story ended. The next was about the latest mission to Mars and showed a robotic probe collecting specimens from the planet crust. Cat stared at it without seeing it, chanting, "Our living room, on TV," to herself. I was interested in the pictures of the bare landscape, wondering what the Martian weather conditions were like, and if life might ever have existed there. Neither of us noticed until it was too late. A firm hand grasped my shoulder, and Cat's. I turned round. So did Cat. We were face to face with the strange man. He smelt of alcohol. His eyes were slits. His lips were pressed up tight. I knew what that meant. Anger. Extreme. His grip hardened on my shoulder so it hurt. "You again," he hissed. Chapter 30. The Road to Nowhere. Cat said nothing. I said nothing. His grip relaxed. He took a step back. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You followed me, didn't you? You followed me here from the scooter show." Cat nodded. "That missing kid, the one on the news, is that who you're looking for?" "Yes," said Cat. "He's not just some kid. He's our cousin Salim."
Why do you think I had anything to do with it?
Because it was right after you gave us that ticket Salim went up the London Eye, but he never came down again. The strange man looked at us with one side of his lip up, the other down, his nose scrunched up, his eyebrows bunched together.
Crazy kids,
he said. But he wasn't looking at us. He had his eyes raised upward as if we were floating above him in the air. We're not crazy, Kat said. He looked down again and gave a strange kind of smile.
This cousin of yours, he went up the eye and never came down, you say?
Yes.
Kids don't just vanish into thin air.
Kat sighed. That's what the police said. The man's eyes shifted round from her face to mine. It's serious, Kat said. The police are looking for him, and now it's all over the TV.
I don't know anything about it. I told you before.
Did you really just buy a ticket and decide not to use it? The man looked around and backed away.
It wasn't exactly like that,
he said. A bus crammed with passengers had pulled up at the nearby stop. A woman with a buggy struggled to get on. The driver stared at her with his lips turned down. The strange man glanced at the bus, then looked at us.
It was this bird,
he said, his words speeding up. The bus revved up. The wheels of the buggy spun as the woman seesawed it onto the platform. My hand was shaking itself out.
This bird in the queue, that's who I got the ticket from.
A bird? I said, thinking of crows and pigeons.
A dark-haired chick, nobody I knew. I was just passing. She called me over and said how her boyfriend hadn't shown, and she didn't want to waste his ticket, but she didn't want to lose her boarding slot either. So she asked me to go over and give it to you.
Why us? Said Kat. The man shrugged.
Dunno, you were kids, right at the back of the queue, I guess. She took pity on you.
Suddenly he dashed over to the bus just before the driver shut the doors.
It's her you need to talk to, not me, if you can find her.
Then he gave a strange laugh. Wait, screamed Kat. Don't go, wait. She ran after him, but the cross-looking driver shook his head at her and shouted, Full up, and shut the doors in her face. The strange man raised his palms upwards as well as his hands, and the bus jerked forward and gathered speed down the high street. Hell, said Kat. I said. Shut up, Kat shouted. The bus, along with the strange man, disappeared under a bridge. Kat clenched her fists and banged them on her thighs like she was a boxer fighting herself. Then she kicked a Coke can on the pavement into the gutter. The road to nowhere, she said in a voice so loud that passers-by stared at us. One great big bloody waste of time. On the word time, she crushed her boot down on the Coke can. Road to bloody nowhere. The boot stamped up and down. The Coke can went pancake flat. Nowhere. She burst into tears. And which way's the bloody tube? I've bloody well forgotten. Chapter 31. Tornado Touchdown Time. Somehow Kat found the way back to the tube. She stomped up the high street with me trying to keep up, and my hand flapping, and then she asked directions from a man who was painting a railing, and he pointed a finger, and she stomped on, acting as if I wasn't there, and I kept up after her until we got to the tube. We travelled the long way home in silence. Then we walked back up the main road and into our street, and she still said nothing, but she let me walk beside her now, and her lips were turned down, which meant she was sad more than angry. Outside our house, she stopped and said, We're for it, Ted. Our hair isn't even wet. I touched my hair, confused. Then I remembered. We were supposed to have gone swimming. Maybe we can just sneak in, Kat whispered. She got out her key and was about to put it in the lock when the door flew open. Mum stood in front of us, barring the way. Her hair was messy, and her eyes were wide as volcano craters. She dangled our swimming gear before our eyes. Kat's bikini, 2 sets of goggles, my trunks, She spluttered, dropped the lot, hugged us, cuffed Cat round the ear and screeched, "You disobedient, lying, cheeky chit! And as for you, Ted, I'm shocked. I don't know what got into you, writing that lie about going swimming. I've been worried witless. Cat walked past her with her hands over her ears. "Don't you swan off like that until I've finished with you." I hovered in the doorway, frowning and thinking of swans gliding away in the pond in the park. Then I mumbled, Sorry, Mum, because I knew she was angry, but she didn't hear me. I picked up the things she dropped. She yanked me into the house and slammed the door.
"That Mrs. Hopper across the road's peering out again. God only knows what the neighbors think. TV crews, police cars. I've just about had it. Gloria's gone mental. You two vanish. Have you any idea how I've been feeling?"
Cat laughed. She kicked the skirting board and hooted. "The neighbours!" she screeched. She doubled over. "Typical grown-up crap." Her voice went up an octave and she crooned, "God only knows what the neighbours think. Is that all you care about, Mum? What the neighbours think? We've been trying to help, trying to find Salim, but you're not interested, are you? You don't want to know what we think, do you? All you care about is what the neighbours think. Salim might be dead for all you care." Mum stood eyeball to eyeball with Cat. I realized they were exactly the same height.
"Don't you dare say that! Don't you dare!"
Mum's hand darted up, as if to hit Cat hard on the cheek, but it froze about a centimetre off target. Her voice trailed off. The temperature in the hallway seemed to plummet to -30 degrees. Cat stared at Mum, her eyes round. "Go on, hit me," she hissed. Mum shook her head, and I could see tears falling down her cheek. Her hand fell to her side. I stepped forward. "Mum, Cat," I said, but they paid no attention. Then Cat's lips started to wobble. She pushed Mum out of her way, wailing, "I hate you! I hate you!" She ran upstairs, tripping halfway. "Hate you! Hate you!" Our bedroom door slammed. Then something upstairs crashed. It was tornado touchdown time, or T times 3 in our house. This is my way of describing what it's like when people have really bad arguments, and it is the worst place to be in all the world. Mum slumped on the bottom stair, head down in her hands. Her shoulders heaved, and she made a strange noise. I'd never seen Mum like that before.
"Oh no," she moaned, rocking herself. "Is there no end to this?"
I wasn't sure whom she was talking to and looked around. I was the only one there, which meant she was talking either to me or to God.
Oh God,
she said. So it was God, not me, and I was free to go. I decided to check out the weather in the back garden. Chapter 32. Solar Wind. I walked fast through the kitchen and out into the back garden, my hand flapping. The general synopsis at 1800 issued by the Met Office. Fitzroy mainly northerly, 4 or 5, becoming variable, thundery showers. I did my pacing, counting the strides it took to get from one side of the back garden to the other. 12.5 strides long, 7 across. I ducked under the line of dry clothes, grabbing onto a sheet. I left a grubby stain. My fingers were still black from going through the phone book earlier. Eye of the Needle Solutions. That's what I needed, a solution for the impossible. How you get through a needle point. How you disappear from a sealed pod. I thought of the girl on the motorbike, the pink sleeve in the photo. I thought of Dad's razor blade. I thought of the strange man and the lady saying how he was fired, and him saying we should find the bird with the dark hair. And I thought of what Aunt Gloria said earlier.
If brains alone could bring Salim back, yours would do it, Ted.
I held my hands over my ears and shook out my head. My brain felt like it was overheated, going into meltdown. I paced the garden and recounted my steps. Only this time the number came out wrong. 11.5 strides instead of 12.5. So either my legs had grown in the last few minutes or the universe had shrunk instead of expanded. Whoa! I went, like the Earl's Court motorbikes. I looked up at the sky. Evening, high stratus clouds, fresh southwesterly, but air pressure falling. One of Dad's shirts on the line flapped against my head. The wind was picking up. I walked over to the garden shed and kicked it a few times. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a meteorologist, but I believe in meditation. Buddhists believe that if you empty out your head, that's when you find enlightenment. Kicking the shed is a good way of emptying out your head. It's like jumping on a trampoline. You kick or jump, you jump or kick, and eventually all the thoughts march out of your ears like a line of toy soldiers heading for the edge of the table. You're left with nothing, the empty nothing I told Salim about, which is frightening and lonely, but simple and clear. I shut my eyes and imagined a vast silent void. I kept up the kicking. By the 87th kick, I was empty inside, and a kind of solar wind arrived in my brain. A storm of charged particles rushed through my head like lightning, giving off strange flashes of colored lights. A picture formed. It was like the aurora borealis burning in my brain. It sparkled so hard it hurt. The pattern I'd half glimpsed earlier that day flooded back, but this time it didn't vanish. I caught it. I hung onto it. I made it freeze like ice. Then I knew, not where Salim was, but how he'd vanished like he had. Chapter 33. The Sound of the Storm. When you try to talk to people in the middle of a storm, they can't hear. They can't catch your words for the sound of the storm. Thunder, rain, and wind. And the things the storm moves. Leaves, roof tiles, rubbish. I came in from the garden, 87 kicks of the garden shed wiser, but I couldn't make myself heard. Dad was just coming in from work. Mum was still sitting on the stairs. She ran to him before he took his coat off. Her arms went around him. She put her head on his shoulder. "Oh, Ben, I'm so glad you're home." "Faith, love, what's wrong? Has there been bad news?" "Not since we spoke earlier. The press has been here, twice. Glo's been terrible all day. This afternoon she had a panic attack. She couldn't breathe. I called the doctor. He gave her a sleeping pill. She's upstairs, flat out, the first proper sleep she's had since Salim went missing. Then the kids just took off somewhere without asking. And Ted left a note about going swimming. Imagine, he lied, Ben. I didn't know what to do. I thought we'd lost them too. Then Rashid went out to walk the streets. He said he was going mad sitting around waiting. And just now the kids came back. Oh, Ben, the relief. They came in the door, and Kat and I... Shush. We had a row. So what's new? A terrible row, Ben. I nearly hit her. I came this close. She held out her finger and thumb, a centimeter apart. Then she started wailing again. Dad said, "Shush." But she didn't stop. I stood a couple of meters away. "Dad," I said. He didn't answer. "Mum," I said. She didn't answer. I waited and tried again. "Dad? Mum?" Mum looked round and swallowed. She said, "Oh, Ted, there you are. Can't you go upstairs and read a book or something?" "But, Mum, I've worked out—" "Shush, Ted," Dad said. "Now isn't the time." The words were hard and short, not like Dad's voice at all, and Mum started crying again, so I went upstairs. In my room, Kat lay face down on the lilo, her fist clenched up and pressed between her eyebrows. I noticed that my alarm clock was on the floor, broken into bits. That was the smashing sound I'd heard earlier at tornado touchdown time. "Kat," I said. She shook her head, her eyes scrunched up. A tear slipped out and trailed down her nose. She didn't wipe it away. "Kat, I think I've got it," she moaned. "The theories, the 9 theories. I think I know the right one." "Oh, Ted, you and your theories." She grabbed a pillow and buried her head under it. I went up to her and tapped her shoulder. "The theories, Cat," I said. She looked up from the pillow. "Go away," she said. "Cat," I said, then added, "Sis," because she likes me calling her this, as she says it makes me sound normal, but this time it didn't work. "Ted, I don't want to know. Go to hell." "Cat," she took the pillow and banged me on the shoulder with it. "That's to stop you looking like a bloody duck that's forgotten how to quack," she said. Then she threw herself down and sobbed. Next I crept into Cat's room where Aunt Gloria was. "Aunt Gloria?" I whispered. But Aunt Gloria was fast asleep. This was not surprising, as Mum had said she had had a sleeping pill. Sleeping pills make your brainwaves calm down into a sleep pattern. I would like to try one, not so much because I have trouble sleeping, but more to see if my brain, with its different operating system, would respond. Aunt Gloria lay on her back diagonally across the bed, her foot hanging over the edge and the duvet crooked. Her mouth was half open, her breathing loud and low. Her eyelids were a bruised color, a purple smudge. I couldn't have woken her even if I'd tried. I was about to creep out again when I saw Cat's copy of The Tempest face down on the duvet. Cat, like Salim, had been studying it at school. Had Aunt Gloria been reading it too? Salim had said he'd acted in it, and it was right up my street. I realized now that he'd meant that I would like it, because it was named after a dramatic weather condition, and weather is what interests me most. I picked it up, sat down at Cat's desk, and began to read. First, there was a long list of people. This is how plays always start. The author tells you who is who and how they are related to each other, and it is called a cast of characters. This one had a lot of men and some strange-sounding spirits, and a female called Miranda, who I remembered Cat saying was a dish rag. Then I read the first scene. I didn't understand it because the language was almost as hard to understand as French, which is my worst subject at school. I read it again, and a third time, before I worked out that it was about a ship sinking in a storm. That was as far as I got when a groan behind me made me look up. "Salim?" It sounded as if Aunt Gloria was speaking in her sleep. "Salim?" I crept over to the side of the bed, The Tempest open in my hand. "No, Aunt Gloria," I said. "It's Ted." She looked at me. The whites of her eyes were bloodshot, which is what happens when you have been crying or staring too hard for too long at something. "Ted?" she said. She saw the copy of The Tempest and smiled. "I was reading that just now to help me sleep. Salim was in it last term." "I know, Aunt Gloria. He told me." She smiled. "The dashing young prince, Ferdinand, my Salim." She turned onto her side and curled up crying. I stood there in silence, not sure if I should put my hand on her shoulder or do nothing. After a while I realized she'd gone back to sleep. I put the play back down by her side and left the room. Out on the landing I stood and listened to the house. It was quiet. I wondered why nobody could hear me when it was so quiet. Then I started to hear the sounds houses always make when the people in them are silent. Boards creaking as they settle onto the foundations. Pipes gurgling inside the walls. Central heating humming. I clung to the banister at the top of the stairs. I heard something else. My heart thumping. Blood pumping in my ears. The distant tick of the clock in the hallway downstairs. It was time. Time had a sound too. I'd never heard it before. I put my hands over my ears. It was deafening. Mum appeared at the bottom of the stairs. She came up silently and gave me a hug. I squirmed. "Ted," she said, "I apologize. To you, but especially to Cat." "Mum," I said, "I've worked it out." She patted my head as if I'd said nothing, went past me and knocked on my bedroom door. There was no reply, but she turned the handle and went in. She shut the door behind her. I heard her voice, soft and sad, coming from the other side. Then I heard Cat's. I couldn't hear their words. I went downstairs just as Rashid let himself in through the front door with the spare key. He stood in the hallway, looking ahead with no expression on his face that I could decipher. "Uncle Rashid," I said.
Sorry?
He said.
Oh, hello, Ted.
Dad came out of the living room and greeted him by saying,
Do you want a can of beer?
and they went into the kitchen, just as if I didn't exist. Then I went into the front room. I went over to the mantelpiece and picked up Detective Inspector Pierce's card. I stared at it. I'm no good at telephone conversations, but I remembered how she'd smiled at me when I told her about Salim getting a call on his mobile, and said how she wished her officers had half my brains. She'd listened then. I normally only use the telephone about once a week. This is because I have nobody I need to telephone, but sometimes Mum makes me call the directory enquiries number, as she says I need the practice. Today I was about to use the telephone twice, which was far more practice than I wanted. I sat on the side of the sofa, on top of my flapping hand. I picked up the phone with my other hand. Then I dialed Detective Inspector Pierce's number.